My name is Marjory Purdy, and I'm a piano teacher at Place des Arts. I grew up in the interior of BC, and I studied at the University of Victoria. I also studied in the States and a little bit in Europe and in Alberta as well. Well, when I graduated, I decided I wanted to live in the Lower Mainland, and I phoned a good friend of mine named Anita, and I said, where should I teach? And she said, you should teach at Place des Arts. And she phoned Gillian Elliott, who was the director of Place des Arts at that time, that night, and said, there's this really great teacher, she's moving here, you should hire her. And then I had an interview with Gillian, and then I was hired, and that's how I started. So I've taught at Place des Arts now, this is my 25th year. I have performed in faculty concerts. I have been the host and the accompanist for the Place des Arts Sunday recitals. Oh, and then of course there's my family involvement. In 2002, my mom moved to the Lower Mainland, and she was a very fine piano teacher, and she also taught here until 2013. My kids did classes here. They did all of Mr. I's levels, and they've also done the art camp and art classes, and to this day there are certain things that still spark Mr. I songs. In the summer we were driving past a pumpkin patch, and at the exact same time my daughter and I started going, pumpkin patch, and we started singing Mr. I's song, and this happens on a regular basis. And I know that sometimes on Saturdays when I'm teaching downstairs in the basement, Mr. I is nearby with his class, and we will hear some of his songs, and I have some of his former students, and we start laughing, and we'll say, oh, it's the ghost train going behind the piano, or it's the gong for Chinese New Year, or we hear all the different songs and we start humming and we have a good laugh. That has an interesting story. My mom had a teacher who wanted to teach. So it was really she's the one who began it, and she just sort of started it in its infancy and said, well, he wants to teach, but I kind of want to keep an eye on him. And that was the beginnings of it. Shortly after that, she retired, and then I had some students, and then it blossomed into what it is today, where there are several teachers and 2 different layers of teacher and training, and it's a big legacy, actually. I think that's one of the biggest impacts on Place des Arts, actually, is seeing that go. And then there are kids that, in some cases, have been here since they were 3 or 4 years old that are now teaching. I think the most memorable moments, I don't think it can be boiled down to a moment, I think it's moments, are around the children. It's watching them come down the hall to their lesson, singing, skipping, smiling, hopping up onto the piano bench, eager to learn. The privilege of sharing time with children as they grow up, often working with them from a very young age until they graduate from high school. Having that kind of continuity. I've had students joke that I'm their second mom. To me, I think those are the most memorable moments. It's not one specific, it's an overview of many, many moments put together. So this past summer, I was asked to be the officiant for one of my former students' weddings. And she actually is in the teacher training program here. Her name is Robin. And it was wonderful to marry her, as I've known her since she was in early elementary school. And then one of the other teachers in training, Stefan, was there with his family. And we were all together during the wedding, and I've known his parents. I've known Stefan since he was 3, and he's well into his 20s now. And it was just wonderful. They've become friends, and to have that kind of continuity and that kind of relationship with students and their families is very precious. I think that the impression when you walk into Place des Arts is one of light and energy, and there's a wonderful ambiance that creates this sense of joyful learning. And that welcoming feel when you walk in the door draws people in, and wherever you draw people in, you have community. There's a lot of benefits to the arts, too many to articulate here, but I think the lasting relationships, the joy that children have learning is just so precious and very unique to here. I have not come across another physical space like this in my travels in the States, in Canada, in Europe. I've never seen another building that creates that same sense. And then it has been very lovingly tended over the years by so many different staff that have really worked to create a welcoming environment. And from that, a community has grown. Well, I should mention that the very first year I taught here in terms of stories and what it was like, it was the year that the newer portion of the building opened, but the older portion of the building had not been joined yet, and it was in the process of being moved. And so I taught on Mondays here, and I taught in the afternoon in Mackin House. And then about halfway through the year, I was able to move into a room that was in the newer part of the building, but then I had more students. And there was no room for me because the buildings had not been joined yet. So a piano was moved into the storage room across from 105. So I used to teach the afternoon in 105, have a quick dinner, and then go across the hall and teach in the storage room. So for half a year, I taught in the evening in the storage room next to all the paraphernalia that's in there.